Okay, it's 6:30. Can we have some quiet? Young lady, can you sit down over there? Can you sit down? We're about to start the meeting.
What?
No respect. Homer and the public. At this time, I'd like to open the Administrative Services Committee meeting for September 17, 2018. Please call the roll.
Councilor Corradino.
Here.
Councilor DeMasi.
Here.
Councilor Hill.
Here.
Councilor Tesserero.
Here.
Councilor Wilmot.
Here. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 4th, 2018 committee meeting? Councilor Hill, Councilor DeMasi.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMasi.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes. Is there any old business to work on tonight? Seeing none, moving right along to the first item under communication. Item number 1, the Engineering Department requests approval of change order number 1 for the general contract with W.D. Malone Trucking and Excavating Incorporated for the West Side rehabilitation of sanitary sewer second 25%. Funding for change order is provided for the allowance under B1-13 for miscellaneous additional work. I see Mr. Johnson's here if he wants to clarify this. I think it's not too complicated.
Yeah, Councilor, the miscellaneous work count, going to fund it. The $28,000 change order, basically, for increase in the size of the sewer liner. Our records showed that there was a 15-inch line, and the field work did not determine that it was different. It turned out that when they got there, it was a 20-inch line, and they had to have a new liner made for it. And so that's the way it went.
All right, that sounds pretty cut and dry. Any questions for Mr. Johnson? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Councilor Tesrerio, Councilor Wilmot.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMasi.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Item number 2, Randall Griffin, Fire Chief, requests permission to send one member of the Oswego Fire Department to attend the planning and preparedness for the Chicago Marathon hosted by the City of Chicago Emergency Management Unit to be held October 5th through the 7th, 2018. Chief?
Good evening, councilors. This is for travel expenses. The City of Chicago Office of Emergency Management has extended an invitation to the City of Houston and the City of Oswego to help with the preparedness planning and the execution of their marathon. What it'll do for us for the cost of the travel expenses will give us the experience of managing large incidents. You know, what types of things are they planning and lessons learned that we can learn. It would take us a number of years to plan an event that big. So this would offer us that opportunity to learn those lessons. So we're going to send the Deputy Chief of Emergency Management to Chicago. He's going to spend 3 days there. He will do get tours, like I said, with the City of Houston on their forward command, take part in exercises, and then help out with part of the race.
Very good. Any questions for the Chief on this item? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please? Councilor Hill, Councilor Wilmot.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMasi.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes. Moving along to item 3, Thomas Kells, DPW Commissioner, requests approval of several transfer of funds between multiple Department of Public Work accounts. Commissioner Kells, would you like to share anything with us here on this?
Sure. This is clearing up some accounts that have lower amounts of money and putting them into some other accounts so that we can purchase some needed equipment and supply.
The annual house cleaning, moving of money. Are there any questions for Commissioner Kells on this transfer? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Councilor Tesrerio, Councilor DeMasi.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMasi.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes. Computer just went.
So did mine.
Yours too?
Long time ago.
This is embarrassing. This is embarrassing. Thank you, Councilor.
I'm old-fashioned, you know.
Item number 4. Route 48 and West 4th Street water projects were not completed as of December 31st, 2017, and there's $83,000 was remaining from the original authorized amendment, and it was not encumbered by the department and was therefore returned to the water fund balance account. Now therefore, the City Chairman is hereby authorized to complete a budget amendment in the amount of $83,000 to account number F.8340.40410 for the transmission, distribution, materials, and supplies account. Commissioner Kells?
Councilor, he said it all right there. That money was not all used last year. Both projects are still under construction. They're not complete. Therefore, we still need that money to pay for materials, supplies, and so on to finish.
So the way I understand it is because the money was not used in 2017, it goes back to the general fund, and we have to just re-encumber it or designate it again for this project.
Right.
Do we have the money? It's all... All right, that's the important thing. We have the money. Any other questions for the commissioner or for... Yes, Councilor
Just a
Goss.
comment. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate the work being done on 4th Street. Some of the people at the end of the street have been getting rusty water for years, so I know they'll be grateful. And hopefully next spring maybe we can get it repaved when we start paving again. But I appreciate the work you're doing down there. I know it's a big project, and I know my constituents do as well. So thank you very much to the mayor and DPW commissioner and the workers down there.
Anybody else have any comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Councilor Hill, Councilor Tesorario.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesorero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
Is there any other items for this committee? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Councilor Tesorario, Councilor Hill.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Tesorero.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
At this time, I'll call the Physical Services Committee meeting for September 17, 2018 to order. Please call the roll.
Councilor Hill.
Here.
Councilor Wilmot.
Here.
Councilor DeMassey.
Here.
Councilor Gozick.
Here.
Could I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 4th, 2018 meeting? Councilor DeMassey, Councilor Wilmot.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Gozick.
Yes.
Is there any old business to come before this committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business under communications. Item number 1. The Office of Economic Development received a request from Buck Boosters regarding the Spirit 5K event to be held on Saturday, September 29, 2018 at 9 a.m. The event is not requesting road closure but would like a police escort to start the race as well as throughout the course. Mr. Rudgick?
Thank you, sir. It's pretty straightforward. I did check with Chief DK about the police escort, and they're fine with providing the police escort for the event. So again, it's pretty straightforward. OPD is on board.
Are there any questions for Mr. Rudgick? Councilor DeMassey?
And there's no cost. We just use somebody on duty, right?
Yeah.
When we're doing that.
I mean, when I submit those requests to OPD, they just let me know if they can provide that or not. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? Could I please have a motion? Councilor Gozick? And a second? Councilor Wilmot?
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Gozick.
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, the Office of Economic Development received a request from Greg Mills, owner of Murdoch's, regarding a celebration event to be held on Sunday, September 30th, 2018, from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. The event is requesting use of public space at Riverwalk West and Veterans Stage. Mr. Rudgick.
Thank you. I'm actually going to turn it over to Greg Mills. Greg is here, and he can talk a little bit about the event and why he's looking to do it.
Try to be kind enough to provide a little copy of the flyer that we're going to do. Would you guys like one of those? Yeah, definitely. To look at?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Do you have extra? Well, if you don't, that's okay. I'm not going to charge us, are you?
So thank you, councilors, for giving me a moment to discuss this event. And I haven't been here in quite a while, so it's good to be back in front of you and discussing some things that I think are great for our community. So about a year ago, I bought a bike shop in Oswego and wanted to be a retailer. So I made it a year. So that's the reason for the celebration. So we're looking to do an event at the Veterans Stage. I actually, in the flyer, it puts it at 3 o'clock. We ran into a little bit of a concern because at the time that I originally planned this, we didn't realize Pumpkin Fest was on the same day. So that, I think, is going to run to about 4. So it'll give us a little less of an overlap with that event. So what we would like to do, as I said, celebrate 1 year of being in business and the opportunity to serve the people of this community. And secondly, to recognize the great success that we've had with an event that we call Taco Tuesday. As you can probably guess, we did it on Tuesday, and there were tacos involved, and there were bikes involved. At this time, we have touched 85 different people during that ride. And at times, actually through about a 6-week period, we had rides that went anywhere from 26 participants to 31 participants. These are people that had just bought a bike, were new to cycling. They weren't racers, they weren't experienced cyclists, but they found an opportunity to come together with a group, have fun, do a little riding, and then also have a little taco and some beverages afterwards. So it's been a great event. I think it's brought a great awareness to the community for some of these cyclists. We ride around and they didn't even know some of these things are here, and the people lived here. We had a couple that were visiting from Virginia Beach, and they found it on our website and brought their bikes with them and rode with us on a Tuesday night. We had a young man that came to visit a friend in college that was from Germany, so that probably will be our farthest traveler that visited with us and rode in the bike ride. So it's been a great outreach, been a great event, and we really want to bring everybody together and celebrate it. September 30th, the reason for that date was it probably will be close to our last ride for the season, and we just wanted to recognize the people that have participated, have some drawings, do some bike demonstrations, have some food, some beverages, and just enjoy each other's company as well as the idea of our community and cycling in it.
Are there any questions for Mr. Mills? Pretty straightforward. Sounds like a great event. Okay. Could I take a motion,
And
please?
I just welcome, or invite you all to join us.
Councilor Wilmot, Councilor DeMassey.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Gozick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other business to come before this committee? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councilor Gozick, Councilor DeMassey.
Councilor Hill.
Yes.
Councilor Wilmot.
Yes.
Councilor DeMassey.
Yes.
Councilor Gozick.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order September 17, 2018. Can I have the roll calls, please?
Councilor Tesserero.
Here.
Councilor Corradino.
Here.
Councilor McBrady. Here.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the August 6, 2018 committee meeting? Councilor Cordino, Councilor McBrady.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Corradino.
Yes.
Councilor McBrady. Yes.
Is there any old business to come before this committee? I see none, so let's go right on to communication. Item number 1, Councilor McBrady requested discussion regarding the winter parking restrictions. What we're going to discuss tonight is enhancing the winter parking permit process, the associated fees, and to let the body know is this vote this evening will allow this to go to a public hearing. So the public will be able to speak after we vote tonight to see if this is going to go to a public hearing. So I am going to turn this over to Councilman McBrady, who spearheaded this in kind of a subcommittee type basis and done a tremendous amount of work, and she's well versed. And if I could turn the floor to Councilman McBrady, it's all yours.
So we did Earlier this year, Bob Wilmot, Ron Tesorio, and myself met several times over the year to talk about the existing permit process and the possibility of putting forth an incremental change. So right now, you can apply for one on-street parking permit if you have no off-street parking in the city of Oswego. And that permit costs $75. What we were proposing is that we enhance that to a second permit if you have no off-street parking, which will cost twice as much as the original permit. So the first permit would be $75 and the second permit would be $150. If you have one off-street parking space, you would be allowed to apply for one on-street parking space. You would need to have more than one vehicle to qualify for a second space on the street. In other words, if you have an off-street parking space and you only have one car, then you don't qualify for a parking space on the street. But it's basically a way to help mitigate homeowners who are in a position where they have inadequate parking. So in the first ward, we have a lot of off-street parking, free municipal parking, I mean. We have the Wrights Landing. We have, the city chose several years ago to pave down the length of Liberty Street. They also chose to pave down from Liberty Street down to John Street on West Schuyler. So there is a lot of parking opportunity for that west end of the first ward. There's also parking opportunity on the east end, because that's closer to Wrights Landing. But we are losing Flexo Wire, and over on the second ward, you are losing the Price Chopper parking lot as a municipal opportunity. So the pressure is, we felt that the pressure is increasing on homeowners who have inadequate parking. So the other thing that we realized we had an opportunity to do was clean up the language of the original change. So we have, in some places the code says owner-occupant, in some places it says resident, and in one place it said tenant. So we reconciled it all to resident. The third thing that we did was we changed the language so that there should be no assumption of where your parking space will be, to make it clear that the DPW can put the spot where it makes the most sense, a balance between where the homeowner or the resident lives and where it makes sense for plowing and safety and emergency vehicles. And finally, we did include, after talking with Mr. Kells this past week, the language right now says that the counselor will determine where the parking space will go, and that's not how it works. So we'll change the language to reflect the way the process actually is implemented, which is the Chamberlain office gets the application and the fee, and if the applicant qualifies, they pass it on to the DPW, who then determines where the spot, where we can manage having the spot.
Any comments? Any comments from the councilors? Councilor Hill.
One question.
You can't tell if Miles is on.
Okay, I do have one question. Is what you're proposing for the homeowner only? So would it apply only to the homeowner or for the occupants within the home as well?
Residents, yes.
So whoever lives in the house.
But it's only 2 spaces, so it doesn't matter if you have 4 people living in the house or in the residence and they all have a car.
Right.
You're only eligible for 2 permits.
Councilor Hill.
Just, I see we're striking ownership of and occupancy, the ownership piece. So is this opening it up right at the beginning? So this would be opening it from owner-occupied residence to anyone?
Resident.
Okay.
The person who lives in the property. Right.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be the owner. It doesn't. So it could technically be someone who's in a, family that's renting.
So it is
a
changing from
single-family home.
owner-occupied to occupied?
2 application. Verification of occupancy in the residence, yes. So that was one of those, so that was where the beginning of the, contradictions were. So here it said ownership of and occupancy in. You'll see later it said ownership and resident, and then there's a third spot where it said tenant. Hyla.
So, all right, say you live in a multifamily and there's 5 people, tenants live there and there's a parking lot.
Then you don't qualify.
Okay, at all, you would not
At all.
qualify to get an, if
At
they
all.
have parking, you don't get to just apply for 2 permits
have-
at that residence.
No.
Okay.
If you have, it does not matter how many people live in a property with vehicles. If there are 2 or more parking spaces on that property, they do not qualify for a permit.
If I may speak from the chair, I think we've got to be very careful because we have an existing zoning ordinance that says that any occupied home that's not owner-occupied has to have adequate parking, period. Otherwise, they don't grant a permit or they don't get a rental permit. And that's established right now. So is that something we got to go back? We have to be careful about this because we'd have to change that also. And I don't think, I mean, we have to think long and hard about that caveat because right now what we're trying to do is tell landlords that want to, put 2 and 3 and 4 people that they have to have adequate parking, that we don't provide parking for them. And I think we're going down a slippery slope there, to be honest with you. So we got to be careful about that. I think the language, we have to revisit that. John?
Yeah, just point of clarification, thank you. No, and again, that was my biggest concern as well, because I talked to Susan about this the other night, and I've taken time to read through it repeatedly to make sure I was as familiar as possible with it. And just a couple parts, if the councilors are looking for this, it's section D2B2. It sounds like a Star Wars droid, but it's actually the law. And verification of ownership and occupancy in the residency, this was under the section, winter parking permits application. And I know, at least from my recollection, when all the discussions we've had over the last 3 years and the law was changed, that was something that I wanted to emphasize because the reasoning behind it is, Councilor Tesoriero has pointed out, is that, we're concerned about landlords that don't have adequate parking, and we all know I have 3 or 4 rentals on my street, and it's not the students' fault that live there or the people. When they don't have adequate parking, and even if there's 4 or 5 people and there's 2 spots like they're supposed to have, they're not the streets are packed, and even on a regular day. And this was my big concern, and then I seen the discrepancy. I got to admit, I missed this before, and I don't know if it was an oversight. Perhaps city attorney could clarify this. But then later on in section, 6C, winter parking restrictions, it points out in section C that permits shall only be issued to applicants who are owners and occupants or tenants. And I know from experience in my ward there was, I noticed it struck out in this, but there was an exception for medical, if somebody had a medical need or a special need. And actually it turned out that one was granted in my ward. It caused some issues, but that's another story. But it was granted to a college student who was a tenant, but because it was at the request of his family there was some sort of medical concern. But I just didn't know if that was an oversight when we revamped it before, or I don't know if the city attorney can clarify if there was a reason for that, or if it's beyond your
Well, we're
scope or
allowing a
not.
permit now, just because you live there and you don't have parking. So you don't need a special medical.
Right, but my concern is I don't want tenants, landlords, using this and taking advantage of it when there's 3 or 4 on my street. If each place could apply for 1 more, then my concern would be then there's going to be more cars on the street.
If you have 2 parking spaces, it doesn't matter how many people you put in that property. They don't get any more space.
Right, but I'm just saying for a landlord, as Ron was pointing out on the codes, a lot of the landlords don't provide adequate parking. And my biggest concern is safety and efficiency. The DPW, needs to be able to clean the streets in an efficient manner, and the safety issue, getting emergency vehicles down the street, school bus. I mean, that's my concern. So I was asking, I don't know if there's a way to clarify that point, but I missed that. I don't remember that being in there. I know it's right there, but it seems to be contradictory. Am I wrong, or is there a reason? Could you explain or elaborate on that?
Counselor, you're asking me to interpret something on the spot.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I
And
didn't
that's
mean to
fine.
put you on the spot.
I'll look into it. This particular attorney didn't draft this, so I'm not completely conversant on the, you know, the interplay between what's being proposed and what's there now. So I'm happy to study it, look at it, answer your questions, but not prepared to do so tonight, at least not this one.
And I know Councilor Cordino, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you recollect the reason for that, if it was an oversight or if it was something that was in there before when it was amended. I was just wondering. That was a point for me that I was a little bit confused about, and I heard Councilor Tesserero had to say, and that's a big concern of mine, is that it wouldn't be abused.
The latest one. You need the one that's on here, John.
I'm sorry, what's that?
You need the copy that's on here. So it's different than the one you're looking at in hard copy.
Okay, what's the difference? I'm sorry.
This is the one with the final adjustments.
When were they made?
This is one that we emailed you last week.
This was the copy. I'm sorry, I don't know. The copy I have is the same one.
It came from Trust.
Okay, this is the only copy I have right here. What section do you want me to look at? I believe
Is there any more comments from the council?
Yeah.
Councilor Hill.
I think it's important that this language isn't changed, this verification of ownership and occupancy, because the whole intent, from what I understand, is that this is to encourage home ownership, investment in your home, bring families back into the neighborhoods to invest in homes, not to assist landlords who are already under obligation to provide adequate parking for their units. So I think owner-occupied was the intent, and that was one of the selling points when this was, pitched the first time.
That was one of the things that we were trying to point out, is that when it was pitched, and maybe Rob and John can talk more to this, it actually was pitched a few different ways when they finalized the writing.
Right, but by taking it out of the applicant shall provide, you're opening it up to properties that aren't owner-occupied and bringing consistency in that.
Right. So it basically is the idea that you are trying to encourage landlords at the same time to make sure that they are investing in their properties and keeping them up, and not just...
But landlords already have an obligation to provide adequate parking in order to offer a rental property. So...
Well, for single-family homes, I mean, I seem to have a lot that get a permit for one driveway.
It seems like owner-occupied would be something very beneficial to this policy.
I don't mean to interrupt, but there's clearly zoning issues that address exactly what Councilor Hill is talking about. And we established that to prevent exactly what we're trying to do, is when somebody does buy a property with multiple tenants, before they're granted a rental permit, they have to provide adequate parking.
We can reconcile it to owner-occupied.
I think that's a very smart thing to do, and I think it's like Councilor Hill stated, what we're trying to do is get the single-family ownership back in the neighborhoods.
Okay.
To reestablish neighborhoods, not necessarily, income-based tenants. Not that we're discouraging that also, but there's always places where that could flourish. It might not be in certain neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What about someone who's rehabbing houses in single-family houses, renting them to families? A family can move in, they've got one car, they're young, they've got one car. They start a family, now they've got two cars, they don't have a place. They're putting down roots. They're a good part of the neighborhood, but you're not going to let them have a spot just because they don't own it?
Well, then we have to go back and look at the current zoning.
But nobody's enforcing that zoning, obviously.
Oh, I think they are. I think under this administration they are. I don't think you'll see too many permits issued without having adequate parking anymore. It might have happened in the past.
Perhaps.
It might have happened in the past, and I'm not, but I know for a fact that the code enforcement and the zoning enforcement has done a better job of enforcing the fact that you're not going to have a 3 or 5 or 6. Now, single-family home, we may have to look at that a little bit differently.
I think that should be looked at
Well,
differently.
and then that's...
You're lumping it into college housing right now.
I don't
If
think
I
we're,
had a duplex and
I don't think we're looking at college housing.
Let me finish my thought.
I'm sorry.
If I had a duplex, and I live owner-occupied on one side, and I'm on the other side, I can't get a permit for that person? I mean, I know people right now in that position in the first ward who have, they live in their house and they have an apartment upstairs or whatever, and they don't have enough parking. They were given permits, and it wasn't that long ago. And I don't think it's fair when you've got people who are investing in their property.
And I will not disagree with you. I will not. The only thing I'm saying is we have to go by what's existing right now. We're in the process of trying to make it better. It might not be perfect for every ward, every street, every situation. We are going down the avenue of exploring, trying to get a solution that makes sense. Something that we can, make work. And it's not going to work for everybody. It's really not. But we're trying to make it a little more friendlier. We're trying to make it more conducive. We're trying to encourage development, and the right kind of development in the city of Oswego. And I think that's all that we as a council and citizens, that's what we want. It's only going to increase property values. It's only going to make our places more attractive to people who want to come and develop here. So I think, and like I said earlier, this is just to get it to a public hearing. We're going to take a vote. There'll be enough time to discuss many items on this as we go forward. We'll have a few weeks to digest what we've talked about tonight. But at this point, I would like to make a motion to get this to a public hearing if there's no more comments.
You have a question right in front.
Oh, I do? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I own my home, I'm owner-occupied, but I have no driveway at all, and I am very much for 2 spaces. That would be lovely. However, what would happen if you had a house, no parking, and you wanted to rent it? If you wanted to turn it into a rental, does that mean that you made it owner-occupied and then that person wouldn't be allowed to have a car at all?
They'd have to use the municipal parking.
So that's what you're trying to say, if it wasn't owner-occupied, you wouldn't be allowed to have any space. You have to walk, no one would rent it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right.
No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is what's currently present, we're kind of contradicting in a way. This would have to we'd have to relook at what we've already got as far as zoning, because that would change that also.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? What we're saying now is, because of the fact that if you were to apply for a rental permit for your home, and I think... No, I know. But if you were to apply for a rental permit, right now you'd be denied, maybe. That's right. So, this would somewhat combat that, but we'd have to go back and relook at what we've got in zoning. So, see where I'm going with this? This is not just a simple matter. It becomes a complicated matter that we have to, we've got a lot of thought into this. We want to make it right. We don't want to make. This has been 3 or 4 councils of dancing around multiple things that we want to make sure that we do it and do it right. Yes, I got gentlemen in the crowd.
I think one of the things to the chair, I think the problem that you've got is never going to be solved. And I suggest that you ought to start thinking about building some commercial parking garages, which I've been after for almost 6 years. I'm not that. I think it's a parking space, and you've got spaces where you can put parking garages, which will create a lot of problems you have right now.
Thank you. Councilor DeMasi.
Maybe lots that could be turned into parking, and you could apply for a permit for parking, you made it into a lot where you could put 10 cars, and one of the vacant lots that are around town, you pay, you could park in that lot, and you have your number.
Well, right now, you can park in any of the municipal lots for free.
I understand, Susan, but I'm not going to walk down the hill.
Excuse me. Let's address the chair. Let's address the chair, please. Okay? That's all right. Councilor DeMasi.
With what I'm hearing now, and this is from the committee that's been working on it, if you now have zoning and possible code and everything else, I would suggest we don't move this on till we're prepared to have the discussion and have the answers to it before we go ahead and move forward. I just feel that this is not ready to move on from what I'm hearing tonight. That's just my opinion from what I'm hearing.
I believe, and I was not there, so Rob and John, please feel free to, if you were part of the original discussion, the winter parking ban is a temporary fix for a situation that we find ourselves in, which may be why they inserted the word, tenant or resident, because it's not a permanent situation. It's only the 6 months that we have the winter parking ban on, so it didn't affect perhaps the actual code requirements of a rental property. But I don't see any reason why we couldn't reconcile it to owner-occupied. I just think it's interesting that the first council that approved it felt strongly enough to make some leeway for single-family homes without adequate parking, even if they were occupied by a tenant, family or rental.
Well,
so the idea, this is not an opportunity for landlords to get another parking space for the 4th or 5th student in the property.
Susan, I don't think anybody's saying that. We just got contradictions that we need to clarify. And we do. Unfortunately, they exist. So we've got some time.
Yep.
We got some time to do some homework, which we as a council have to do. But I would like to proceed with this forward to allow it to go to a public hearing so people can be heard. We've got time. I'm going to make a motion right now to present this for a public hearing.
Can I just ask Kevin a procedural question quick?
Yes, you can.
Kevin, if we move this to public hearing, the language that's published has to stay the same.
Well,
we can bring an amendment to it on the floor.
you can. What you're voting on now is just the public hearing on the proposed ordinance. If there are changes that are made as a result of public comment and acts of the council, that ultimately has to be put into a final form for you to vote on, and then it's published in the newspaper. So the ordinance itself is not published tonight or next week calling for the public hearing, just the notice of the public hearing.
Right.
In order for the ordinance to be official and adopted, it has to be published in its final form as amended, and then 10 days after it becomes law.
Okay.
Right.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
I just want to point out for the city clerk, we also have to give it to the state and then hear back from that. So we were already a little bit concerned about making the November 1st date if anything's presented on the schedule it was. But we will be able to make that. I'm saying if it's table and you wait, then we'll be past November 1st because we have to wait for the state to give us the
If I'm not mistaken,
Excuse me.
Tress did it as a...
Susan?
There's 2 different options, aren't there, Kevin?
Yeah.
And we want to do it as the option that just requires 10 days.
Right. So there's... no, Mark's correct. It's ordinance versus local law. What Mark was talking about is the local law, and the next piece of legislation is proposed as a local law, but I'll give you a teaser right now.
But this is we're doing an ordinance
Well,
change.
we're going to... I'm proposing that the next one be also an ordinance, not a local law, so that they're consistent. I'll get into that. I don't want to confuse the issues, but ordinance published in the local newspaper, 10 days after publication, it becomes effective.
Right.
Without anybody
So
else.
that's the structure that we're working on.
Correct. That's right.
Councilor Goza.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, after listening to all the councilors and the public input, I agree with Councilor DeMasi at this point. It's extremely, and Councilor Tesoriero, he said this is it's complicated. We got to go back and look at the zoning. It seems like we're doing this on the fly. And I'm not saying I support or don't. I agree with Councilor Hill that the language, the owner occupy and proof of occupancy and ownership is important, and that's what I remember emphasizing in earlier discussions. And if anyone remembers, those discussions dragged on. The email chains that came through, okay, this went on for like 2 or 3 years, and councils went up and down it, inside out, okay, with a fine-tooth comb, they went through it, and as Councilor Tesserero pointed out tonight, you're never going to make everyone happy, but it seems like we're doing this on the fly here and shooting from the hip. If it's not prepared properly now, then we're going to put pressure on everybody I'm not saying oppose it, but if it was tabled, it can come back up, right? If it was like polished up and we had checked into the zoning and then prepared it. I'm not saying to shoot it down, and as our city clerk pointed out, November 1st is the deadline, but so what are we going to do, make a cannonball run here to then, and to me, it just seems like there's some serious concerns and discrepancies of the language. The city attorney wasn't able to even interpret. And I just think we deserve some of these answers before we go forward with it. I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but I would like to, it just seems like all of a sudden we're doing this on the fly. And I don't think that's a good idea, considering how many times we've addressed this. And when you look at the ban, that's the way it always was here in Oswego. So this is Oswego, New York. We get a ton of snow. And in a rough winter, okay, we've been lucky, we've been spared the last few years. We need to consider, first of all, public safety, and second of all, the ability of the DPW to efficiently do their job. And, so I agree with Councilor DeMasi. I just want to go on record saying that I think that we need to take a step back and have this prepared.
I will take a little bit of exception, because basically what we had the opportunity to do here and what we worked on is tightening up the language that was set back then, fixing some discrepancies and some contradictions. So we're not saying that it has to be resident, or just that right now in 3 different places it says 3 different things. So right now if you look at one, you can do it if you're a tenant. If you look at another, you can do it if you're a resident. And if you look at another, you can only do it if you're an owner-occupant. We can reconcile the language if the council feels that that's the way to go, to owner-occupant. But this is an opportunity to reconcile that. And that's not on the fly. I mean, we've had a chance to look at it. We've lived 2 seasons with it.
All right. Councilor DeMasi.
My biggest concern with saying table it is, and this is from the chair who's been involved with all this, is questions have come up tonight. It has obviously put a red flag into Councilor Tesserero also as far as code, as far as zoning. I just feel like other issues have popped up that you weren't aware of even. I don't want to just have a couple words changed without getting into finding out with moving forward to pass it through. It's my suggestion that we would have some more solid answers before we go. How much is it affecting code? Have you talked to zoning? Have you worked that out also?
We can, if the issue of code is addressed, if we reconcile the language to owner-occupant, because as Ron said, rentals are, when they get their permit, required to provide adequate parking. So if we say owner-occupant, then we are reconciling it to the existing code.
Okay,
that's not a guess, and that's not on the fly.
I would like to intervene here. We have kicked this can down the road. This is not a vote to pass anything, by no means. This is a vote to invite the public, their input. We have time to make changes.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to, I understand Councilor DeMasi's and Councilor Gozik's need to table, but I think what we need to do is, we need to do our job. We need to do our homework, we need to get it prepared, we need to get, and we've got some time to do that. And that's what we're ultimately assigned to do. So I'm looking for a motion to put this, to go to public hearing, and I got Councilor DeMasi. Do I have a second?
I'll make a motion to move it to public hearing.
And I got Councilor Cordino.
You said Councilor DeMasi, it was McBurdy.
Or McBurdy, I'm sorry.
Councilor Tesserero.
Yes.
Councilor Cordino.
Yes.
Councilor McBurdy.
Yes.
Sorry.
Not a right for the record.
Second item, Mayor William J. Barlow Jr. through the City Attorney proposes a local law amending certain provisions of Chapter 257 of the City Code, Vehicles and Traffic, to eliminate the practice of allowing property owners to pave over public green space in front of their real property to accommodate off-street parking. Mayor, would you like to intervene here? And
Really what this is just legislation that's kind of stems from the change to the parking. I think seems like every season last year we instituted the permit parking to help those who need it. We're expanding it so far. It sounds like we're expanding it. And I think if we are going to give people the opportunity, afford them the opportunity to park on the street, then we really should outlaw allowing the front yards of properties to be paved. There are two extreme examples that have happened here recently, and they were both in neighborhoods that personally I thought had a lot of momentum, a lot of improvement and investment taking place, and I think the two particular projects that I cited in the email really deter all the investment and the momentum and progress that that the area was making. So looked at the code, and really what this proposal does is strikes some language. Right now it reads there's 3 exceptions. You're not supposed to pave the front lawn, but there's 3 exceptions to the rule. In 25726D, paragraph 1, that portion of the paved street which is open to the public thoroughfare, in that paved or graveled portion of driveway on public property in the city of Oswego, unless the city of Oswego has issued a permit for said parking. So we're doing away with that possibility. Doing away with the area of with paragraph 2, the area of public space between the curb and sidewalk, as well as between the sidewalk and street line, which has been allocated for parking by the Common Council by resolution. We're going to eliminate that. And then the third paragraph, he or she is the owner of the property in front of which said vehicle is parked, or he or she has permission from the owner to park said vehicle on such city-owned property. So we're going to strike that paragraph as well, which means that you can't get permission in any way to pave your front lawn. I think if you consider all the investment, all the good things happening in the city right now, any city we want to model ourselves after or strive to be, if you drive down their neighborhoods, you see in front of their homes are trees, grass, sidewalks, curbs. I suppose I could come up with a couple communities, but the communities I think of where I see similar situations to what I've seen that just happened and what has happened over decades is not what we want to keep doing. It's not a model neighborhood if you have front parking, blacktop parking pads in front of homes. Additionally, for 30, 40, 50 years, anybody, landlord, owner-occupied, whoever, mainly landlords, have been able to walk in City Hall and pave whatever front yard they wanted because nobody cared. So my other point would be, if it hasn't happened yet, is there a real need? After all of this time, you decided now you need to pave your front lawn. I think they're probably doing it more now just because they can rather than need. And if we inch with these parking permit expansions, I think we're inching towards alternate parking maybe down the road someday, but as long as we keep expanding these permits, in the meantime, we shouldn't allow people to destroy public infrastructure paid for by the taxpayers just to convenience, however many people they have in the house, or, in one example that happened recent, I don't even think there was a need for parking at all. I think they just paved it to pave it. I don't know. So that's really what this came from. I think it is necessary. I think it's long overdue, and I really think I'd be hard-pressed to find a real need existing today and find a situation where somebody absolutely needs to pave their front lawn.
Thank you, Mayor. Any comments?
Did you want to change that from local law to ordinance before we vote on it?
Yeah. I'll let him handle that. Yeah, so that is the change I'm recommending. This was actually done by way of an ordinance when it was first adopted, I think in 1990, and then it was revised in 97. Had a discussion with the clerk's office, and as far as we could tell, and it was confirmed that this was done by ordinance. So kind of rule of thumb when you're adopting local or laws like this, if it's a local law, it needs to be amended by a local law. If it's an ordinance and you're amending it, it's preferable to amend by way of ordinance. So that's what we would be proposing here. Would not be a local law, would be an amendment to the ordinance. I'll draft that and circulate it so you have it for next week's meeting. But that's the only thing that would change, just the form, not the substance. Yes.
So we would be voting on change of...
Yeah, well, what you're going to actually vote on tonight is establishing a public hearing for amendment to the ordinance in Chapter 257, Section 26.
Any other comments? Councilor Cordino.
Thank you. I did a little research, and I found out that approximately 20 years ago, there was a councilor, back then they were called aldermen, that proposed something similar to this. And at the time, the council and the whole mindset was different than, I believe, this council and even last year's council. That with the momentum that the ORA is doing in some of our neighborhoods, and with the investment of people, I think, again, going back 20 years ago, that plan failed. That alderman proposed the same thing that the mayor is proposing now. But again, I think things are different now in the year 2018. And I think that this ordinance, this revision of the ordinance, the time is right for it, but I think in conjunction with enhancing the winter parking permit system, I believe they go hand in hand. You can't, because I know the mayor eloquently pointed out that people who wanted a park or who wanted to pave in front probably already got their spots, but you know, there's always going to be some kind of scenario where, you know, down the road somebody's going to want one. And if we don't have any options for them, for example, winter parking permit system, then I think that's going to stifle any kind of investment. So again, I think what the mayor's proposing and what we talked about a few minutes ago on Councilor McBridy's proposal, I think they go hand in hand. So I support the mayor's resolution here and proposal. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
When you say paving, when do you put curbstone in there? Do you understand what that is? It's a block system where grass grows in between, and when the grass is growing there, it looks like green space, but you still can park on there for off-street parking. Now, I was allowed to do that. I did not want to put pavement in there at the time, and I think it looks great. So, does that include or not include that in your
So what we're doing is revoking permission to park in the front lawn. So it would prohibit that as well, and I think that looks equally as bad sometimes.
Right, we're not revoking.
Yeah, if you have it, you get the key. If you already have it, you're all set. This is just going forward.
Any other comments? Yes.
So I have a question. So I had no parking, as I said. So if I wanted to put a parking in front of my house, I think you know where I live, I would want to park under my front porch. So would something like that, would there be some sort of exception for something like that? If it's actually not parking on the green space in front of your house?
You're talking about a driveway?
Right. If I had a driveway, but there was actually like a garage for it. Would you allow something like that?
I'm not following you.
If you're putting in a driveway, then the use of public space basically becomes the apron that allows you to get to your driveway. Because I don't believe that this would prevent people from
No, you can still lay down a
upgrading their
driveway.
property to include a driveway if you have the land to do that.
Correct.
Because it's saying you just don't want people parking basically like on the sidewalk, into the sidewalk.
On the curb, right, on the utility.
Well, I mean, what I've seen lately, really what this is, there's really two scenarios. If you're putting down a driveway, that's fine, of course. What I'm talking about is when you see a car pulling parallel with the road in the area between the sidewalk and the curb, which should be grass, becomes blacktop. There's another case where they actually thought it would be a great idea they have no grass. It's all a nice blacktop, I guess.
Would you be specific in that, and maybe in past ordinance, that specific thing, what you just said, parking between the street and the sidewalk, that's what would be prohibited and not putting in
Well,
a driveway?
I think a parking pad and a driveway by definition are two different things, and it's covered, yeah.
Public space is considered, it can go right up to your porch at certain parameters. Yeah, I mean, that would be probably a case by case, but if you're putting a driveway in, I don't think anybody's going to prohibit you from putting a driveway in. I think what the mayor's talking about is between the curb and the sidewalk and paving that whole area and eliminating the green space that we have. So. Any other comments? I see none. Can I get a, let's see how we want to put this. We want to get a motion to approve amending certain provisions of Chapter 257 of the City Code to eliminate the practice of allowing property owners to pave over public green space in front of the real property to accommodate off-street parking and to come before a public hearing. Councilor Cordino, Councilor McVerity.
Councilor Tesoriero?
Yes.
Councilor Corradino?
Yes.
Councilor McVerity?
Yes.
Is there any other business to come before this committee? I see none. Can I get a motion for adjournment? Councilor McVerity, Councilor Cordino.
Councilor Tesoriero?
Yes.
Councilor Corradino?
Yes.
Councilor McVerity?
Yes. Actually, this just occurred to me. There's a difference in